The Facebook ads platform has one of the most robust retargeting audience builders of any of the self-serve platforms out there. To be quite honest, I don't think people take full advantage of it. So I'm going to try and remedy that today. We're going to walk through each of the different types of retargeting audiences you can build on the Facebook platform. And as we do so, I'm going to go through the builder and try to give you some examples to hopefully give you some ideas to think about how you can use this type of audience in your account and level up your retargeting game. For the duration of this video, we're going to be in the audience manager portion of Facebook Business Manager. We're going to run through each of the different setups of how you can create remarketing audiences on the Facebook ads platform. I do have a couple examples that I know I won't be able to walk you through as specifically as I would like. There are some instances where I won't have an example to show you, so we'll hop out and see some help articles, but for the most part, this is where we're going to stick. So to create our remarketing audiences, we're going to come over here to create audience, and every remarketing audience option is going to be under this custom audience option. What that's going to do is open up the custom audience creation tool. This is the first step of where we choose what we want to do. And the first thing we're going to choose is what source we want to use as the remarketing audience creation step. So first, you can see that these are broken down into two groups: your sources and Facebook sources. There's pretty simple delineation here, and let's walk through it really quick. Basically, anything that comes from your sources means that you own that information. So whether it's your website or your app and you're passing information into Facebook to create audiences from a specific pixel, or something coming from a customer list or offline activity where you're uploading this with regularity back into Facebook to create audiences, you own that data from the start. You just pass it back into Facebook in one way or another to use it to create audiences from. The other group is going to be Facebook sources. What this means is that Facebook owns the audience creation step. It owns the information from the start. So whether it's your video, lead form, instant experience, shopping, Instagram account, Facebook page, events, or on Facebook listings, all of these are data points, events, activities that a user will take that Facebook owns the information for because they did it on the Facebook or Instagram platform. They leveraged either a Facebook lead gen form, they watched a video on Facebook, some type of audience engagement like that you don't own, but Facebook does. So that's the first thing. We need to decide which type of source we want to use for our audience creation. And that's kind of the gist of how those two are separated. So now let's start hopping into how each of these is going to work. Probably the most robust type of audience creation process you can use is going to come from either the website or app activities section, because there's lots of nuances of how you can set these up. Unfortunately, app activity is one of those that I don't have a specific example from, but the good news is that there's a decent amount of functionality that will behave the same way as the website creation process. As I'm going through the website portion, think about how this might relate to your app. But when we finish up the website section, I will hop into a couple of those help articles I mentioned to look at some type of app event tracking and that sort of thing and how you can use it for audiences. So let's go ahead and get started with website audiences. The first thing you'll do here is choose the pixel that you want to use. We've already got our pixel here, and you can see there's a green dot, which means that it's functioning the way that we need it to. For now, I'm going to skip this step up here that says include people who meet any of the following criteria. We'll come back to that in just a minute, because I first want to show you how we can start to create different audiences and the options that we have for filtering users based on how they engage with the pixel. The first and the preset option here is going to be all website visitors, and it usually defaults to the past 30 days. This just means that anybody who comes to your website in the past 30 days is going to be included in this audience set. If you hover over the eye here, you can see that the maximum time for this type of audience is 180 days. So throughout the duration of this video, I'm just going to leave the date range as the preset date range that comes with the audience, but know that if you want to set it for a longer range, there are many different options. You just have to hover over this and you can see what the different time frames are that you can create an audience for. You can see by looking at the all website visitors section that there is a drop down here, and this is where a lot of the functionality comes in for building our audience. So let's click on that. And what that does is changes the builder to now you can see that we're focusing on people who visited specific web pages in the past 30 days. The different parameters that we're going to use are URL, which is a little bit grayed out because we're not able to change that since we're targeting based on web pages. But then you can see that there's contains available. So what this would be if we wanted to create, let's say, a list of people who visited your thank you page, you could easily come up here and type in thank you. And now your audience will target anybody who visited a web page on your website that contains that specific version version of thank you in the past 30 days. If there are a number of different thank you pages on your website that use this text, you can change the different types of audiences that you have here so that it has to equal this specifically, not just any page that contains thank you. So there are some different parameters that you can use here. Overall, this one's relatively self-explanatory. Like I said, this is probably what you're familiar with most other retargeting audiences. If you want to narrow down the URLs a little bit more, let's say that the equals rule doesn't totally apply, but it has to contain thank you and ebook, something along those lines. You can click and also, and that'll open up a new builder here that says that the same URL must contain thank you and also match whatever you put in this second field. So let's say I put ebook here. Now this rule means that we're only going to create an audience of people who visited a web page where the URL contains thank you and contains ebook in any order and any placement, but both of those different text values are found in the same URL in the past 30 days. So there's a lot of different rules that you can create in here to make sure that you're targeting only people who visited specific web pages on your site. In the same vein, if you also wanted to target people who hit any thank you page except the ebook thank you page, you can easily change the contains option to say does not contain, and now you're going to target anybody who hits that thank you page but did not download that ebook that you had available. Pretty easy stuff. The next option in the main breakdown is going to be to segment visitors by time spent. And now you can see that the builder has changed quite a bit. Rather than having different placements to type in URLs, now we're focusing on percentiles on the website. So what this allows us to do is to create audiences based on the top 25, 10, and 5% of users who spent the most amount of time on our website. So depending on what you're trying to go for here, you can really focus on the people who've spent the most time on your site, either the top quarter, the top 10%, or the top 5%, whatever makes the most sense to you. Again, you have the date range available off to the right here. You can also set this up for specific web pages. So now this looks a little bit more like the regular builder does for the URLs. You can say if somebody spent a certain amount of time on a video page or maybe a blog page, something along those lines, you can find the top 25, 10, or 5% of users who've spent the most time on those specific pages. And you can narrow that down by just using URL rules in here. The next set of audiences you can create are going to be a bit different, and it depends on how robust your pixel setup is. So if I click on the drop down, you can see that we already went through website visitors, web pages, and time spent. But this next section down here has a dark header from your events, and you can see all these different events available down here. Depending on how you've set up your Facebook ads pixel, you'll see any different number of events here. For this account, we have an entire purchase process set up, so there are custom events going throughout the entire set, from page view down to purchase. In other accounts, you might only have page view that pops up because you've not enabled any different custom events on your website. These are going to all be based on what you've set up in the pixel. So if you need these different events, you might need to go set up your pixel before you can create an audience off of this. So let's say we want to target users who have added items to the cart. So let's go ahead and add the add to cart item. And now we're going to create an audience based on add to cart in the past 30 days. But if we want to refine that a little bit, we can choose this refine by link, and it'll open up a few different options. You can refine by the URL or parameter, the aggregated value, or device. So let's go through each of these. URL rules are pretty much the same as what you can use on the website options. You can do URL contains, does not contain, or equals. So you can create audiences of users who added items to cart, but the URL contains certain values or does not contain certain values, whatever makes the most sense there. The one that might be a little bit more useful in this example is the parameter section. So let's click on URL because now you can see it's not blurred out. And now it's going to create this new dropdown. So URL is still the main option chosen here, but just like the events navigator from earlier, we've got parameter as a dark header to signify a new category. And down below, we can see all of the different parameters that are found within the pixel that are being passed back in. So whether it's currency, the number of items that somebody has in their cart, the category of what they added, or the value, you can create different parameters based on what somebody added to cart. So let's choose value. And now we can start to create different rules of users based on the value of what they added to their cart. So you can use contains, does not contain, which is helpful in some instances. But since this is likely a numeric value, it's really helpful that now you can see that you can create rules based on the amount that is in somebody's add to cart. So it can be greater than, equals, does not equal, less than, whatever makes more sense. So if you want to target only people who have added things to cart that cost more than $50, $50, you can choose is greater than, add in 50 here, and now you're only going to create an audience of users who've added items to cart with over 50 in value, usually $50 in value, in the past 30 days. There's a lot you can do to customize here. You can also then click the and also button and again, do the same level of breakdown based on the URL or parameter that's available here. So let's close that. And now I want to go back to some of the ways that we can refine our add to cart. So let's close this as well and come back to refine by. Now, instead of using the URL parameter, which we just went through, now we're going to look at aggregated value. And this is going to have some overlap with what we saw in the parameter section, but there's a few other things we can do here as well. So the first thing we can do here is do the aggregated value based on frequency. So the number of times somebody added items to the cart in the past 30 days. We've got the same different levels of breakdown of greater than and equal to, greater than, equals, less than or equal to. You get it. This current rule would say we want to target everybody who added items to cart 2 or more times in the past 30 days. So just think about how frequently people come back to your site, engage with you, make purchases, or add things to cart, and how that impacts your audience creation. The next thing we can do a filter by is for the sum of, and you can select the parameter that you want to use here. So sum of the category, IDs, name, type, currency, number of items, or value. So let's say the sum of the number of items, and then you get to select the operator, is greater than, let's just say 4. So now we've got an audience of people who've added items to cart. The number of items that they've added to their cart in the past 30 days is more than 4. So now we're starting to customize very specifically how people are engaging with the website, even more than just the frequency. These people have more than 4 items in their cart, so 5 or more. The rest of the different filters that you can set up underneath this sum of piece are going to be the same as they are here. Whether it's average of, minimum of, or maximum of, you're always going to have the parameter available, then the operator, and then you can add the value that you want to have available here. So I'm not going to go through each of those, but if you want to find somebody who has an average value in their cart, that they have a minimum value or a maximum, whatever makes sense to you, you can set up these parameters all in the same way that we just did the example of sum of here. Okay, now let's go back one more time, clear this out, and set up a new refine by option. The last one is going to be by device. So we can choose to refine by only people who've added to cart in the past 30 days if they are on all mobile devices, which includes smartphones and tablets, if they were on an iOS device, Android device, or desktop. If you want to target only people for whatever reason who are on iOS, you can create that audience in here as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can refine by the events that are available from your pixel, as long as you're passing a number of them back into the Facebook ads platform. So now I want to go through some of the additional functionality that we haven't seen just yet that's kind of outside of this main builder. You've probably seen what it is, and I just haven't talked about it yet. So let's clean this up a little bit and kind of go back to the start with a fresh slate. So the first thing I want to talk about is this include people who meet any of the following criteria. This is going to dictate how you create the audience in Facebook ads. So you can see that from the drop down, there's either any or all, utilizing the different options that we have here. So the first being any is that you capture people who completed any one of the actions that you have below. So let's go ahead and look at what this is. So if we create a website list of people who have visited the thank you page, now down below here you can see include more people. Let's click that. Now you can see this or parameter here, and that means that you are creating an audience of anybody who visited this thank you page or meets the criteria that you set in this box below. They only have to meet any one of the items that you have available here. They do not have to meet both. So what this does is it expands the audience when you say include more people, because this is now an or function here. That means that you're trying to expand the audience that you have. Now, if we were to go the other way and choose the all option, this means that people have to fit in all of the parameters that you have available. Now you can see that this has changed a little bit to where you have to be somebody in the thank you page audience and you have to meet this secondary action that's below. So this is going to narrow the audience. And what that does to help you out is that they actually changed it to further narrow down here to make sure that you know that you are making your audience more narrow each time you add a new box here. And Facebook even opened up this warning down here that your audience audience size might be too small because we're using this all parameter and we're narrowing each time we add a new section of the audience into this list. So let's go ahead and change this back to any because that's going to be kind of the larger range, gets rid of that warning. So that helped us see what this include more people is. So now we know that every time we add a new box here, we're going to either include or narrow the audience based on what this setting is up here. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit. The last option down here is going to be to exclude people. So now we're trying to say that we want to target anybody who visited a certain page, but also did not visit this page below. So what this might look like would be you want to target all website visitors, but then you also want to exclude anybody who visited your thank you page. Now, effectively what this audience is a list of non-converting website users, anybody who hasn't taken the purchase event, whatever that is on your website. This is how you would use these type of exclude parameters in here. You could also continue to exclude more people if you want to refine it. And there's also the refine by option down here, like we saw earlier, where you can refine by value or refine by device, if that makes sense for you. So as you can see, there's a lot we can do with website visitors, whether it's based on URLs or based on the custom events that you're passing back into your pixel. The type of audience, like I said at the beginning, that is the most similar to the website users is this app activity section. As I mentioned at the beginning, I don't have an app available. I'm sorry for that. But so far, you can already tell that most of the builders are pretty much the same. You have the any versus all functionality up here at the top. You'll choose the app that you want to use. There'll be parameters down here you can set, and then you can include more people, exclude people based on how they engage with your app. But let's hop into a quick couple of help articles just to show you some of the other things you can do here. Once you have tracking within your Facebook app, which is the Facebook SDK, you can have a lot of different app events targeted as well. So there are going to be some specific automatically logged events like install, launch, in-app purchases, and then the SDK crash report. That's just for Facebook. But these are going to automatically log once you get your app installed within the Facebook ads environment and you have SDK up and running to make sure that you're tracking properly. So these will all be available for you to use in some of those custom event audiences. You can also create standard or custom events based on how people use your app. This is just a teaser for it, but basically, depending on what you want users to do within your app, you can create specific events for those, just like we do with the Facebook Pixel on our website, and then utilize those in the audience creation in Facebook ads. The next two audiences I'm going to talk about are also from our sources, and that's customer list and offline activity. And just like I went through the website example and then related app activity to it, I'm going to do the same with these two. I'll show you what we can do for our customer list because that one's pretty easy to use. Offline activity, just like the app activity, takes a little bit more setup on the back end, and I don't have time to go through all of that in this video, and I don't have a specific example of it. So I'll just relate it back to customer list, and again, we'll hop into a couple different help articles to show you some examples of how we can use offline activity. So let's start off with customer list. The first thing you'll see here is that Facebook wants you to prepare your customer list and make it ready for upload. So what it's showing you are all of the different values that you can pass from your database, whatever you're collecting, back into Facebook to try and match to a specific user, whether it's email, phone number, their first name, last name, city, gender, age, zip code, whatever it is. You can pass that information back into Facebook to try and have Facebook match through either a CSV or a TXT file. My advice to advertisers is always to include as many of these different parameters as you possibly can, because each time you give Facebook more information, it has a better chance of matching back to that specific user that you're trying to target. There is one small difference here of these pieces, and this is customer value. When you are uploading this information into Facebook, you can assign a specific value to any given user, and that can be anything that you come up with, whether it's an actual purchase value or revenue from a company, if it's based on just a lead score or a certain add to cart value. It doesn't necessarily matter what the value is, but you can utilize values to show Facebook that this user has a value of 10, whereas this other Facebook user has a value of 100. And that means that when we go to create any type of lookalike audience later, Facebook will take those value metrics into account and try and create a lookalike audience that takes those values and utilizes them to find an audience that is going to drive the most value for you as well. But all of that is actually for a different video. Let's keep going through this one. You can see down here that you can download the list template. If you need to know the formatting of what your customer list needs to be, I encourage you to use this. You can also check out the formatting guidelines just to make sure that you're up to date on everything and get some written descriptions of what needs to happen if you're not quite following the template itself. And lastly, you can import your contacts from MailChimp if you have that available as well. That would be a pretty easy option if you're using MailChimp. Let's go ahead and say that we're going to hop into the next step. This is where you'll tell Facebook if you are or are not including a value that is associated with your users. Pretty easy. If you are, click yes. If you're not, click no, and then hit next. Now this is the last step where we'll actually upload our audience. So again, if you need to, you can still download the template one more time if you don't have it. You can then upload your file, or you can copy and paste from a spreadsheet into this user list and make sure that you have everything formatted appropriately so it'll know the difference between different fields within this list. There are a couple extra steps that when you upload your list, Facebook will ask you to make sure that your columns match the values that it think it does, so that your email column is matching to an email value, first name to first name, city to city, all that sort of thing. But I'm not going to go through that example today. That's relatively self-explanatory. But as you can see, this upload customer list is a very easy option that you have just to upload individual users from your database into Facebook. The beauty of uploading a customer list is you get to decide what the segmentation of your customer list is. Although customer list might just make you think in your head about people who have purchased from you, you can upload anybody that you have in your database. Maybe it's all of your newsletter subscribers that you want to remarket to for them to make a purchase. Maybe you actually do want to advertise to people who have purchased to offer them a referral program, something along those lines. There are lots of different segmentations you can use for your customer list, so make sure you're being creative about how you're uploading them and that they're all a like type of audience. So if you try to target them or create a lookalike off of them, they're going to behave relatively similar and they're going to feel like they belong in that set of ad messaging that you're giving them. Offline activity functions very similar to how a customer list does. You can create an audience of people who interacted with your business in store, over the phone, or by offline channels. So again, as you can see down here at the bottom, this needs offline events set up. And like I said earlier, I don't have a specific example of that, but I do want to show you a little bit from some help articles that might clarify some options you have. The first thing to know is that to create offline events, you need to connect a data source and create an offline data source within your events manager. Once you've done that, you can start uploading the information and match it to those specific events that you're trying to use. And the options you have available here are around the customer details, the event time, and the event details of what they took. So let's say somebody calls your business. So the event details would be that they made a phone call. The time would obviously be the time that they made that call. And the customer details would be around that person's information, whether it's their name, their email, their phone number, whatever identifying factors you have, so Facebook can match that back to users and then attach that to your campaign performance through the events manager, because now you're trying to understand how your Facebook ads campaigns are impacting this user's ability to make a phone call to you and if they made a phone call. Same thing with in-store visits, registering for different things, all this kind of stuff. So think about all the different offline events that you have and maybe set those up in Events Manager so you can start tying those back to users. And then you can create audiences off of those offline event users in the Facebook Audience Manager. So now we've closed out the audiences from our data sources. Let's start to look at the ones from Facebook. And when I say Facebook, some of these also include the Instagram account, because Facebook owns Instagram as well, as most of us and hopefully all of us by this point already know. Like for video or something along those lines, if somebody watches a video on Facebook or Instagram, it'll be included in here. So just keep that in mind that it will include both platforms. And let's go ahead and take a look at what video audience creation looks like. So the first thing we get to do here in the engagement section is to choose a content type. So let's click in here and you can see that there are different parameters for how people engage with your video. They viewed at least 3 seconds, at least 10 seconds, somebody who completed or viewed at least 15 seconds of your video, which is also called a through play. And then the remainder of the audiences are based on percentage. Somebody watched 25, 50, 75, or 95% of your video. All of these are just different ways to create an audience of users based on how much of your video that they watched. Because all videos are different with different lengths, messages, all that sort of thing, I only have one best practice for you here. Make sure whatever length of time you choose, whether it's 10 seconds or somebody who watched 50% of your video, whatever it is, you chose this range because at that point in the video, your target audience should know what your video is about and who you are. So there needs to be sort of an aha moment is what I call it. And that just means that when somebody watches a video, maybe if they only watch the first 3 seconds, you haven't shared your brand name or what you do or what you're selling or anything like that. But at the 50% mark, you have done that. Maybe even at the 25% mark, you've done that. Make sure that whatever audience you're using is relative to that aha moment where the audience should know who you are and what you do in relation to how you want to retarget people. It's almost the same as treating people based on how far they are in your buyer funnel. You wouldn't want to sell somebody really hard on a really expensive product if they don't even know your brand name. So make sure that whatever length of time you're using here matches to how aware the user is of your company or your product. For now, I'm just going to click 50% of your video. Now we can see this little blue link down here below allows us to choose the videos that we want to use. When you do that, this new library will come up and you can choose the page that you want and you'll see the library of videos that you have available. It gives some sort of information about them, like when it was uploaded, how long it is, how many 3-second views it already has to help you understand which videos you can use. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this top one here and click confirm. So now my audience is comprised of anybody who watched at least 50% of that specific video in the past 365 days. You can then edit the selection that you have, or you can choose a new content type and choose a second video. So anybody who watched at least 10 seconds of a different video. If you want to add in something else here, you can do that as well. And now my audience is comprised of anybody who watched at least 50% of the video that I have here. You can then add in a second filter and starting over from scratch, choosing what the different ranges are here. But you'll see that the 50% option is gone because I'm already using it up here. So if you want to say that there are 2 videos that you want people to have watched 50% of, you can just click edit, choose the second video that you want to have watched 50% of, and click confirm. And now you're going to create the audience of anybody who's watched 50% of either one of those videos in the past 365 days. Next, let's look at creating audiences based on lead gen forms. Similar to the other builders, we have the any versus all up here at the top and the include and exclude people down here. But the biggest difference here is going to be around what the lead gen form activity is. So the first thing that you want to do is choose what type of targeting you want to use. So this first thing is going to be anybody who opened this form in the past 90 days. We can then choose which forms we want by clicking in this field. It'll open up the different forms that are available. And let's say we wanted to be anybody in this form and this one. So now anybody who opened those forms in the past 90 days will be included in this audience. We can also change this dropdown to include anybody who opened and didn't submit the form, almost like a page view without converting to your website, or anybody who opened and submitted the form, which is effectively like a conversion. So depending on how you want to target people, whether it's just anybody who opened it, people who opened it didn't submit, or people who actually submitted the form, you can create different audiences based on that form engagement and set those up specifically. Just like with website visitors, if you want somebody who opened a certain form and submitted a second one, you can also start to narrow the targeting down just a bit by changing this to all parameters and then adding that secondary form after it. Keep in mind, there's a lot of ways that you can narrow by who engaged with which forms on the Facebook platform. Next, let's look at instant experience. And that's one of those ad units that you can create an instant experience, which is almost like a landing page within Facebook for people to engage with rather than going to your website. So let's see what this audience looks like. This builder should look relatively similar to the lead generation builder. We can choose from a drop down here of anybody who opened the instant experience or people who clicked any of the links within the instant experience. So depending on how engaged you want that user to be, you can choose from the drop down here, set your date range, and then just like with all of the other pieces, whether it's video or lead gen, you can open up the different experiences. Obviously this one only has one, but you could choose as many different experiences as you want to have them added to the list. Now we're going to target anybody who opened that instant experience in the past 365 days. And just like everything else, you can include, exclude, or refine this search as much as you want. The next option I want to look at that is going to still be relatively similar to video, lead form, and instant experience is going to be the events option. Here we can choose by targeting either people who responded that they are going or interested in an event, or we can choose from a drop-down of a lot of different options. People who are going, they've responded that they're interested, they visited the event page, they engaged with the event, they engaged with tickets, they purchased tickets, or who had the intention of purchasing tickets. So there's a lot of different segmentations you can have of how you want to target specific people, of how they've engaged with your event on Facebook. Just like with the lead gen forms or with any of the other actions that we've talked about already, think about what type of intent you want somebody to have had, what message you're planning to give them, and make sure that they match up. And if they don't, create a specific different audience to make sure that everything that you're targeting to somebody makes sense based on how they engage with your event. You can then choose which specific events you want somebody to have attended or engaged with by choosing the drop down here. And just like with the other ones, you can choose to have either one, multiple, however many events that you want. Just remember that the events that you add here, any of them are going to always function off of this same level of breakdown that you have here. If you want them to be anything different, you're going to need to create a new audience, or you're going to need to include more people and create a secondary set to expand the audience that you're trying to target. For the last 4 audiences, I'm going to talk about them kind of at the same time because there's kind of 2 different categories. And the first one is going to be based on your Instagram account or the Facebook page. So let's start off by looking at the Facebook page. Here you can choose how people have engaged with your page, whether it's everybody who's engaged with your page, anybody who's visited, which is almost the same as a website visit, anybody who's engaged with a post or ad, somebody's clicked on a call to action button, somebody who has sent your page a message, or anybody who has saved your page or any post that you have available. So there's a lot of ways that people can engage with your page on Facebook, and here you can start to create different audiences based on how they have engaged with you. If you want to get any further clarifying information, you can just hover over the eye and see the different types of actions that people can take to be included in a specific audience. Now, I grouped the Facebook and Instagram page audience discussions together because they're very similar. So I just flipped from the Facebook engaged audience to Instagram custom audience, and you'll notice that a lot of this is the same. Anybody who engaged with your professional account or your Instagram account, anybody who visited your account profile, engaged with any post or ad, anybody who messaged you, or anybody who saved a post or an ad. So like I said, very similar to how people can engage with your Facebook page and the audiences you can create there, but these are going to all be based on how they engaged with your Instagram profile rather than your Facebook page. And again, since Facebook owns Instagram, that's why they have all this information, as long as you have your Instagram account tied into your Facebook account and into your business manager. The last 2 types of audiences I want to talk about are similar, but for different products within Facebook. So the shopping section here, that's going to be a Facebook shop audience. That's going to be the shop portion of your Facebook page where you have effectively a different tab on your Facebook business profile. People can visit your online store and they can engage with different products. And in some instances, they can actually purchase from you directly from Facebook. The on Facebook listing section is actually going to be for marketplace. And this is more for individual users who are trying to list certain items. Sometimes, let's say you just want to sell your dining room table. You can add that to your Facebook page. It shows up in marketplace and people can get in touch with you to buy it, but they're not going to buy things directly on Facebook with an e-commerce solution the way they could with a shop, which is more meant for business solutions. So let's take a look at what each of these are, starting with the shopping option. Here we have a lot of the same types of options everywhere else. The biggest difference is that you can choose either a Facebook page or an Instagram account to start with, and then choose the appropriate profile that you want just next to it. So let's keep it to a Facebook page for right now. But then we can start to create audiences based on who viewed specific products in your Facebook shop, anybody who added the products to their cart, or anybody who made purchases. The one difference I want to show here is that when you hover over this eye, this one specifically says this doesn't require checkout to be enabled, but these other 2 do. They say that you need to have checkout enabled through either your Facebook or Instagram shop. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to track these specific actions and you won't be able to create an audience off of it. So if you have all of the full tracking set up, you can use any of these options. But if you don't have checkout enabled on your Facebook shop or Instagram shop, the only one you'll be able to to use is people who viewed your products. But just like with all the other types of targeting we've talked about, you can start to create different audiences based on any of the products they've added to their cart, and then you can start to include or exclude more people. The only limitation here is that you're not able to refine by certain products or anything like that. You can only choose the high-level categories of viewed a product, added it to the cart, or purchased. That's it. There's not any more customization other than that. Unfortunately, it's not quite as robust as maybe we would like it to be or to match the website engagement, but the fact that Facebook lets us do it is still pretty great since we wouldn't be able to track it any other way. Lastly, let's look at the on Facebook listings, or those that are associated with Marketplace. Just like with the Facebook shopping option here, you can choose the page that you want the catalog to be from. And then from the drop down here, you've only got two options. This one's probably one of the most limited. Anybody who viewed products in your catalog, or anybody who messaged about products in your catalog. And that's pretty much it. But also that's because since it's Marketplace, like I mentioned earlier, people can't make a direct purchase on the site. It's just people who messaged you. Effectively, you're just saying anybody who viewed my product and anybody who took the time to get in touch with me about the product. You're still able to target anybody who is interested versus anybody who saw it specifically on the Facebook platform. And again, you can also include more people, exclude, or narrow the audience based on any of those two parameters in any way you see fit. Okay, I know that was a lot. Thanks for bearing with me, but because there are so many options, it takes a little bit to get through each of them. Hopefully, through this run through, now you feel more confident to either start retargeting on Facebook or level up your game by using some of those more intricate, more specific audience types in your campaigns. Thanks for watching our video. If you thought it was useful, give us a thumbs up below.
We release a new video at least once a week, so if you want to get notified of when a new one comes out, be sure to subscribe to the Paid Media Pros channel.